Native species of flora and fauna are under threat, and that is not good news for us. Hello and welcome. I'm Sadhika Tiwari, and you're watching Eco India. We need to conserve these species, otherwise, soon they will be extinct. Plants, animals, and even your morning cup of coffee could be under threat. Let's watch today's episode to find out more. You might have seen these tiny little flowers bunched together, often in bright pinkish or yellow colors. They are called Lantana camara, and they look very beautiful and pretty harmless. But actually, they're an invasive species that is wreaking havoc across the globe. For instance, in Fiji, they have taken over almost 50% of the available grazing land. Here in India's southern state of Tamil Nadu, a tribe has put them to use and is also gaining international fame with the results.
Massive as they are, these elephant sculptures, crafted from lantana, are delicate works of art. They represent the connection between nature, art, and conservation, and symbolize two specific problems. The first problem is the lantana plant, an invasive species that's spread throughout India's forests. This leads to a shortage of native plants for wild herbivores to graze on, including elephants. And that exacerbates problem number two. Conflicts between humans and elephants are increasing.
The whole forest is filled with lantana plants, so the elephants have started encroaching on our property. It can be dangerous to go out, especially at night. Even in the evening, it's dangerous to go to the forest and get vegetable, roots, and honey for cooking. The lantana plants are so thick we can't spot if there is an elephant or tiger in the vicinity. So we can't get what we need in the forest anymore.
The Lantana camara is considered one amongst the world's 10 worst invasive species of flowering plants. Introduced as an ornamental plant in the 17th century, Lantana camara has taken over more than 40% of India's forests. The shrubs compete with native plants for the space and resources. Their fruits are attractive for various animals, especially for birds, which helps disperse the plant further. Tarash Tekaikara has a PhD on elephant behavior and is co-founder of two organizations that are tackling the lantana problem. The lantana elephant replicas are part of an effort to help the real elephants get some of their habitat back in India's southern nature reserves.
So it's a huge problem. Almost 30 to 40% of these parks are largely unavailable for all large mammals because there's nothing there that they can eat. And that's pushing animals out quite a bit, going into fields and farmers who are living around parks and creating a lot of conflict. And the cost of removing is huge. You need people everywhere who are using lantana from their livelihood who will all start taking it out of the forest and do something on scale.
Like these women from Beta Kurumba tribe who live in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve in South India. The 5,500 square kilometer reserve is home to the largest number of Asian elephants in the world. The women have learned to craft elephant sculptures from lantana, symbols of human-wildlife coexistence. The work provides them with a livelihood.
We've seen the real elephants in the forest. And when we saw these models, it made us really happy. First, we are trained to make baby-size elephants, and then we are taught to make adult-size elephants.
I have been doing this work for 5 years. First, for the stick structure, we have to boil it, remove the skin and clean it. The builders will give us the framework and we use that to make the elephant.
The Mudumalai Tiger Reserve in the state of Tamil Nadu, 40% of its 600 square kilometers is covered with invasive lantana plants. Local members from the tribal communities, a team from the non-profit organization Shola Trust, uproot the shrubs with heavy machinery. They remove 2 to 5 tons of lantana every day. The uprooted plant is then shredded, producing valuable biomass.
That biomass can be shipped into factories around and sold. It's about 3 rupees a kilo almost anywhere in India. Anybody will buy any amount. Every tea factory, for example, in the Nilgiris buys about 10 tons of fuel wood a day.
Since 2020, the Shola Trust has cleared about 150 tons of lantana from about 100 hectares of forest land across the states of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Kerala, with positive effects for the animals of the Mudumalai Tiger Reserve.
We have extracted lantana plants from a plot where initially there were no animals to be seen. Now we can see a lot of sambar deers and spotted deers, more than 100 of them, in the extracted plot every day.
And the lantana elephants, around 400 of them have been exported to various countries. The project employs 180 tribal artists. In 2021, a collection of lantana elephants was shown in London. The event was a huge success. In 2023, the non-profit enterprise, the Real Elephant Collective, received a Wildlife Protection Award by King Charles.
I have work now. They deposit our wages into our bank account and we take out what we need and keep the rest in the bank for expenses like our children's schooling or hospital bills. I really like this job. It's great.
The lantana elephants, an aspiring and creative example of how to approach a human-wildlife conflict.
As we saw, there are creative ways to deal with invasive species. However, no amount of ingenuity can root out these invasive species alone. The UN says there are some over 3,500 invasive species that are a global threat to nature, and they are costing the world's economy dearly.
A vast carpet of water hyacinths. The plant is native to Brazil. Introduced to India a long time ago, it has no natural enemies here and causes huge damage.
They grow profusely, and as a result, when they are growing, they hamper or reduce or kill the native biodiversity.
The annual economic cost of invasive species worldwide is over $420 billion, according to a 2019 report published by the World Biodiversity Council. The Japanese beetle, for example, is devouring entire fields in the US and Europe. The result, annual damage to the tune of hundreds of millions. Muskrats also cause millions worth of damage, destroying riverbanks with their burrowing activities. South Africa, meanwhile, is struggling with invasive trees such as acacias and eucalyptus, which require much more water than native plants. Even drinking water thus became scarce in Cape Town between 2015 and 2018. Now these invasive trees are being cut down.
We can save up to 55 billion litres of water every year if we clear invasive trees in the catchments of the Greater Cape Town region. And to put that in context, it's 2 months water supply for Cape Town that we can save by removing the invasive trees from the watershed.
A recent study shows that clearing the trees costs just 1/10 of what other solutions the city is pursuing cost. In India, another solution has been found to reduce the damage caused by invasive water hyacinths. Savvy entrepreneurs are mixing the dried weed with cotton to make saris.
So it is not just alien plants that are a threat to native species. As we just saw, animals too can endanger a region's biodiversity and livelihoods. We visited an island off the coast of Croatia where the shepherds are battling the surprising arrival of a traditional enemy that we have all heard about in folklore.
Jakov Žikic has been out all morning hoping to find at least a couple of his sheep. They are semi-wild and live scattered across the island of Pishkera. His plan was to do some shearing today, but all he found was a terrified lamb. Yakov lives with his family on the Kornati Islands. The archipelago is a natural paradise and has been a national park for over 40 years. For centuries, the people here have lived from fishing, sheep farming, and olives. a fragile ecosystem that is suddenly under threat. Jackals have appeared on the island, wolf-like wild dogs. Zlatko Rujanovic, the national park biologist, is on their trail. It's a coincidence that he is here today. Just 2 days ago, Yakov tells him, there were a couple of mother sheep with their lambs at the house.
How old are they?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And this one's 1 week old.
One.
And here there was another one along with this one. Also 1 week, but it's gone. And these two are gone too. I found this one this morning.
They've set a trap above Yakov's farm. It's an attempt to at least do something. But so far, without success, the trap is empty. Jackals are shy and cunning and masterfully camouflaged by their fur. It's only with video traps that Zlatko gets to see the animals. But that's tedious. It's hot. The island's terrain is rough. Putting cameras in the right place requires as much luck as skill. And then he has to go back every 2 or 3 weeks to replace the batteries and view the pictures. Here, at the only water hole on all the Kornati Islands, the chances are good. The sheep come to drink, but so do the jackals.
Nice race, yeah. But this is jackal, yes, and this is the sheep. Sheep and the jackal, okay. They must drink the water.
Except that this is now life-threatening for the sheep. And sheep are important for keeping the vegetation cropped on the island, especially under the olive trees. They wouldn't grow properly if there were too much undergrowth. We accompany a park administration patrol. They organize regular hunts now and have shot a few jackals, but the animals are still propagating across the islands. The rangers are not yet sure why. They suspect environmental influences.
We're here on the south side of Dugi Otok. Behind us is the small island of Vela Alba. We think the jackals swam from Dugi Otok to Vela Alba and then here to Kornati. In total, that's about 800 meters, and we know from research that jackals can easily swim 2 miles and more.
And indeed, there is a video taken by locals. A jackal calmly swims to the shore. Never before have there been jackals on Kornati. Now you can find their traces everywhere. More and more pictures of dead sheep are emerging. Not all victims of jackals, but most of them.
3 years ago, before the jackal came, we had about 200 sheep on each farm on the island. Now, there are about 60, if that.
The farmer has since spotted a few of his sheep. But as soon as they catch his scent, they take off. Semi-wild sheep farming has no future, Yakov says. He wants to change strategy.
I'll bring in 10 new sheep. Let's see if that works. Not as many as before, but we'll keep them in the barn.
Yakov will probably have to get used to living with the jackals. It looks like they have come to stay, the new inhabitants of the islands.
If there is one integral part of any plant produce in my life that I just can't do without, it's coffee. And I'm sure it's the same for many of you. Coffee is a part of the daily routine of millions across the globe. But climate change is threatening its production. Does that mean that there could be a shortage of our beloved beverage? Let's hope not. Our reporter has found out some answers.
Coffee, the world's second most consumed beverage, and so ingrained in our lives that it's made it into paintings and all over pop culture.
I want to get some coffee. You want some coffee?
Drink a lot of coffee before I go to sleep so I can dream fast.
I always have coffee when I watch Radar. You know that.
This is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee.
But your morning cappuccino might not be guaranteed. Climate change is threatening worldwide coffee crop production. Drought, rising temperatures, and irregular rainfall are ruining coffee harvests. Some studies say the amount of suitable land for coffee production could shrink by half by 2050. Today, people drink over 2 billion cups of coffee worldwide every day. Consumption has almost doubled over the past 3 decades alone. Southeast Asia is expected to have nearly double the global growth rate as westernizing tastes and a rising middle class increase demand. And let's not forget China. Starbucks plans to open a coffee shop every 9 hours so it can reach 9,000 locations across the country by 2025, which means we need to be growing a lot more coffee. But climate instability is already taking a huge toll on production. In 2021, a severe frost in Brazil's coffee region of Minas Gerais wiped out coffee trees in an area roughly the size of Mauritius. Coffee prices surged nearly 13%. Regeneration of the crops and ecosystem will take years, meaning the losses will continue. Such irregular temperatures also make the plants more vulnerable to pests and disease.
For the last 15 years, a rust epidemic, coffee leaf rust, arrived in strong force across Central and South America. In Central America alone, 1.7 million people lost work during that period. So there are human consequences to the challenges.
Part of the difficulty is that coffee is a relatively finicky plant. It goes through a delicate flowering phase before the cherries come in and takes 4 years for a single coffee tree to get a first harvest. Another problem is that out of the 120 or so species of coffee, we only drink 2 of them, Coffea arabica and Coffea canephora, otherwise known as Robusta. Arabica is the higher end stuff that has all those subtle flavor notes we love. As a plant, it needs the temperature between roughly 18 to 21 degrees Celsius, around 30% shade cover with plenty of consistent rainfall. It's more sensitive to high heat, disease, and produces fewer beans. Over 60% of global production is Arabica. Its sibling, Robusta, is a more resilient plant, but tastes not as great, and ends up in mostly stuff like instant coffee. And that's it. We're almost entirely reliant on just 2 varietals. Coffee also has a small gene pool, and at least 60% of wild coffee species are at risk of extinction. This makes our current supply extremely vulnerable.
Coffee research is so behind relative to what other commodities have. We can do so much with traditional technologies, just taking pollen from one plant, putting it on another, creating a seed of something new, collecting data at a global scale. And it's not rocket science. It's very straightforward what needs to happen.
Thankfully, there's some good news.
So there are new varieties coming up, and there are some hybrids that are spread by seed. So there is a future in that kind of variety because it's perhaps more accessible to farmers and easier to distribute.
Starbucks recently announced that it had developed 6 new varieties of coffee seeds, including hybrids, that resist leaf rust and generate higher yield in a shorter period of time. This is big news considering the chain buys about 3% of all of the world's coffee from 400,000 farmers across 30 countries. A few researchers are also trying to fish species out of the wild. Coffea stenophila, for example, is making a splash. It's a rare and threatened species from West Africa that tolerates much warmer temperatures and actually tastes comparable to Arabica. While this varietal has commercial potential, bringing wild species into production can only exist on a niche scale and could take decades. The bigger problem is that at least 80% of the world's coffee is produced by smallholder farmers. These farmers generally work on a few hectares of land and don't have the resources to buy hybrid seedlings, which are roughly 40 to 160% more expensive than the traditional variety. More output also means more labor and carbon-intensive costs like fertilizers. Hybrids use 90% more labor and increase the cost of other inputs by almost 50%. It's an investment farmers may not have the means to take on.
That's why it's also important to have a diversified farming system and not only having coffee, but also trees or other kind of crops in order to have a safety net.
Which brings us to agroforestry. This is an approach that grows coffee alongside other plants like trees, which can increase nutrient cycling, biodiversity, carbon storage, and provide a microclimate. Some can also bring extra income from fruits, timber, or firewood. But it's a tricky balance. Planting other trees for shade lowers air temperature and raises soil moisture, which can protect it from weather changes and fluctuating harvests. But too much shade can hinder yield.
We should work together with the farmers in order to understand what works well for farmers, where are the synergies and where are the contradictions.
So why not just have everyone adopt agroforestry? Well, any change entails risk, which is hard for farmers to justify with just one harvest per year. It also takes extra labor and sometimes extra land to support the harvests of more than one crop. Lastly, it's about farmers' access to resources.
They don't always have access to the information that is being produced by science. We need to combine traditional ecological knowledge or agroecological knowledge together with the scientific knowledge.
Without the support, there's a big disincentive for coffee farmers who often prefer to stick with what they know. Given how hard it is to adapt in our current conditions, the future of coffee could look a little more different than we think. As in, your coffee could come from some unexpected places. Experts say that countries like China and Australia have ramped up coffee bean production in recent years and could become bigger players in the future. But for now, our coffee addictions aren't going anywhere anytime soon, and the industry's strategy to keep up its pipeline is
technology. We are really focused on the technology, needs. I would say in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see a flush of new varieties. It's a paintbrush and a, spreadsheet. Very, very intensive data analysis. That's what we do.
This takes the cross-disciplinary work of scientists, governments, and everyone in the supply chain. But as consumers, the best we can do is pay attention to sourcing. The coffee supply chain often lacks transparency as it's bad for business. So what we can do is work with smaller suppliers who give more information on the origins and production conditions of their coffee beans.
While a lot of these factors that threaten local flora and fauna are not created by humans and are very hard to control, but there are several things that us humans do that also threaten these native species. An endangered species in the waters of Tamil Nadu has been driven close to extinction because of disappearing seagrass, which is their food, and habitat loss. Conservationists in this area have teamed up with fishers to bring back the dugong from near extinction.
There's nothing a dugong loves more than to graze on seagrass. Around 2 meters long, these marine mammals, also known as sea cows, consume kilos and kilos of it a day. But here in the Park Bay area of Tamil Nadu, their populations are dwindling.
When I was a kid, I saw many dugongs here. My grandfather and I, 30 or 40 years ago, we used to catch and sell them.
Those days are long gone. Environmental degradation along coastlines has destroyed the habitat of dugongs all over the world, with vast amounts of seagrass meadows lost in recent years, including in Tamil Nadu. Balaji Vedarajan is the founder of Omkar, an NGO that aims to restore these ecosystems.
Before we started our conservation work, we went to fishermen in local villages and told them that we were going to grow seagrass. They asked why we needed to. It's everywhere in the sea, they said. I told them that in some areas it's degraded, so we need to make it grow again. They were skeptical and said it wouldn't work. We can at least try, I replied.
Divers collect seagrass from meadows that are still intact. Then these sprigs are attached to frames made by fishermen out of bamboo and ropes. These will then be positioned on the seabed.
We make these frames and put them in the water so that the seagrass grows and the dugongs have enough to eat. We're glad to do this. We can't feed the dugongs by hand, but we can feed them indirectly through this work.
By helping restore the coastline, the fishermen now have a regular income again. They go out to sea in the mornings with more seagrass shoots for the frames. The conditions here are ideal. The water is shallow, so the sunlight reaches the seabed and the seagrass grows quickly.
When we say we have to save dugongs, we're not just talking about saving this creature, which is protected under the Wildlife Act. It is about protecting an entire marine ecosystem. Conserving the marine ecosystem by restoring seagrass benefits fishermen too. Indian fishermen won't have to cross international marine borders and fish in Sri Lankan waters. In order to protect resources in our oceans, we have to protect seagrass and marine ecosystems.
But it's a race against time. In some parts of the world, such as China, the sea cow is close to extinction. Here in Tamil Nadu, the hope is that the species can still be saved and its habitat
Native species of flora and fauna are critical to the balance of our ecosystem, and conservation efforts are critical to maintaining this balance. Are there any native species of plants, birds, or animals that are dwindling from your surroundings and you just don't spot them as much anymore? And are there any efforts being made to conserve them? I'd love to know. You can email us or reach out to me directly on my social media. I will see you next week. Until then, take care. Goodbye. Namaskar.